In this week's episode, we have another plasma cutter to review, and it's Bestarc's newest and greatest 10th gen 50 amp plasma cutter. All right, welcome back to Fabbin Adventures, guys. And again, this week we have a plasma cutter to review, and this time it's Bestarc's newest and greatest 10th gen 50 amp. You can see I've got a Bestarc back there. That's a 65 amp, and it's a 7th gen. So we're going to see what kind of improvements they've made from 7th gen to 10th gen, and we're not going to, we're going to cut some steel. I've got some steel here, but we're not going to go and cut a ton of steel because I know it's going to cut, and it's probably going to cut good because that machine there is really good. As you can see, it's got a place on my cart. But what we're going to go into is a little more of the details, the settings, and overall quality of the machine, and its parts that it comes with and accessories. So I'm not going to bore you with a unboxing. If you want to see that, you can see a million of them on YouTube. Just Google it, just YouTube search it, you'll find it. And so I'm not a big unboxer. I'm going to just show you it peeled out, and we'll go through the accessories and stuff. All right, there we go. Nice, new, clean little machine. It always amazes me how light these things are. Super crazy. You can see some differences from the old machine, otherwise identical color, identical size and everything. 220 cord on the back, decent length. It's got your air fitting on the back already. Comes with this hose, and I don't know why they send you this hose. They sent hose with that machine. I haven't needed it. I haven't found a need for it. I don't know why, but they could save themselves a few bucks and not send that no more. The consumables package is exactly what came with the 65 amp. It's got 2 electrodes and 2 nozzles, a couple of hose clamps, and more than likely they're interchangeable. I can check that. And we got the little tool here for taking your consumables out. We got a lightweight little ground clamp. It looks identical to what came in the 65 amp. The clamp, it's got plenty of spring pressure. It seems good. 220-110 converter, and the main event, your plasma gun. Looks identical to the 65 amp. I still wish, like I said before in the previous videos, I wish that they would tidy this up a little bit more. We got all this extra cable. I wish it was a lot closer without this extra cable, but whatever. We'll just wrap it around it and tidy it up a little bit. Call her good. And you get a manual with it. Let's fire it up. All right, let's hook this bad boy up. Turn it on. Nice clear display. Okay, so let's go over through some of the settings here. It's really quite intuitive, just like the other machine. You've got your symbols left and right, and your arrows that select them, and your 2 knobs basically, and your air pressure regulator. So it's set on cut. You can see the green arrow highlighting cut. If you want to set your air pressure, you would unlock your regulator knob, press air, and turn your regulator knob to lower your air pressure or to raise it. Real simple. I like it. Bring her up to 60, call her good, shut her off. So it's in cut setting. Here, your next one, you see it's shown, it's set up to cut plate. You can press this arrow and set it up to cut mesh. If you're cutting expanded mesh, it'll shut off in between contacts with the metal. So in all the open spots, it'll shut off, turn on, shut off, turn on. Pretty neat feature. Most plasma cutters have that these days. Over here, you've got your 2T and 4T, and it's selected on 2T, and 2T is just like everybody knows. You press the trigger once, it fires, you let off, it shuts off. You put it over to 4T, you press the trigger, initiate, you can let off, it keeps on cutting, and when you want it to stop, you press the button and it stops it. Then you've got your post time and your pilot arc. Your post time, the green is highlighted on the PT. It's showing that your air is going to flow for 3 seconds after you shut the trigger off, and you can adjust that up to 15 seconds, I believe, yeah. So here, as soon as you're done cutting, it'll stay blowing for 3 seconds and then shut off. And your pilot arc is how long you want your pilot arc on. You can see the little S underneath here, see it selects. I wish it would stay on what you selected it on instead of it going back, but you can set your pilot arc for up to 15 seconds and as low as 3, and the S underneath it stands for seconds. See, now it resorts back to post time, seconds. And your amperage right there, 15 amps, spin this dial, real simple, up to 50, down to 15. They make these machines so intuitive to use these days that, I mean, anybody next to no experience or not, your first time with a plasma cutter, super easy to figure these things out and cut with them. I mean, it's ready to go. It's got its air hooked up. We're hooked up to 220. I measured the 220 cable and it's 5 feet. It'd be nice if it was longer, but 5 feet will do. And let's cut some steel with it. I'll measure out the torch length so you got an idea how long the torch is, how far you can reach. Make sure it's the same length as the ground cable, because that's a pain in the butt when your ground cable's shorter than your torch length. So let's check those out. All right, here you can see the clamp is about 2.5, 3 feet shorter than the actual torch. I wish it was the same length or almost. That is a little bit of a pain in the butt. I hate it when they're two different lengths, but it is what it is. All right, let's do some cutting with this guy here. Let's turn him on. And I got a variety of plate here to cut. I even got some 3/8 aluminum. And we got her set up here. Let's see what the manual calls for. 3/16. I've got smaller than 3/16, so let's start with that. And it shows 25 amps for 3/16, so 15. We're gonna try, we'll try and cut 1/8 inch at 15 amps, 30 to 40 PSI of air. We'll go with 35. We'll just see how close the settings are to being correct with this. They don't show anything smaller than 3/16 here in the settings, so this here is just a guess. Let's try cutting some 16 gauge. Let's see if I got, here's a better piece. What I don't like is, what I don't really care for is this little standoff that Bestarc has. The one that comes with the Yes Welder is this one here. Hopefully that zooms in so you can see it here. And I like this better than this wire-framed one. This wire-framed one moves around, it squishes the whole bit. And this seems to me like just a better standoff. But we'll work with this. It'd be nice if Bestarc would change this wire out to something different, but I mean, there's a millions of these nozzles out, and these are the standoffs for the nozzle. Pretty sure they can't be changing that now, but it would be pretty cool. All right, let's try. I cut this piece here. And I cut it. Lots of dross. See, if it was me, I would just run this sucker way hotter. I would run this thing at least 20. I would probably run 25 and more air. Let's try that. All right, so I see the high frequency of this machine has messed with my lav mic. I got to redo all these cuts, so let's go through it again from 1/8 inch to 1/2 inch. So for 1/8 inch metal, which they don't show, they show 3/16 as 25 amps, so we're going to go with 20 amps. And the air between 30 and 40, so we're going to call it 35. You can see the air pressure dropping here, right by my thumb. Set it to 35. Nice intuitive machine, definitely easy to tune. All right, let's cut this 1/8 inch. All right, let's try their factory settings, which is 20 amps, 30 PSI. All right, and then we're going to go to my settings, which is max amps, 60 PSI, and we'll cut that and we'll have a look at the difference. All right, here you go. You can see the top cut is the factory settings, the bottom is my max settings, and you can see it's a rougher cut. I had to run slower on the factory settings and faster on my settings, smoother and less draw with more power. Okay, let's try some 3/16. In the factory settings for 3/16 is 25 amps and 35 PSI. Max power and 60 PSI. There we go. You can see the top is the factory settings, the bottom is my settings. A little less draw on mine, a little smoother looking cut, a little more ridges in the cut in the factory setting, because you got to move so much slower with the factory settings, but still does the job. Let's move on to 1/4 inch. We have some 1/4 inch plate here at 35 amps and 40 PSI. That's the factory setting. .60 PSI and 50 amps. All right, there you can see the factory settings on top, my settings on the bottom. Again, mine's smoother with less dross, and you can run quite a bit faster, as you've seen on the video. Okay, here we have some 3/8 Factory setting 40 amps, 45 psi. All right, some 3/8 plates with my settings at 50 amps, 60 psi, and go. All right, there you can see again, the bottom is my settings, the top is the factory settings. Similar speed, I could run a little bit faster with mine, but it cuts 3/8, no problem, and works good. So we're gonna move on to some 1/2 inch if I can find it, and a piece of aluminum, and we'll wrap this video up. Here's a chunk of 1/2 inch, factory settings at 45 amps, 50 psi. 45 amps, 45 psi. Barely made her through. In fact, it didn't. There you can see it didn't make it all the way through at the very end. It flashed back. So let's go with my settings. For a 1/2 inch plate, max power 60, we're gonna go with 65 psi. 50 amps, 65 psi, 1/2 inch plate. Okay, so some of you guys are going to want to know probably what the duty cycle is, and it's showing here on 220, it's got a 60% duty cycle. According to the manual here, it's showing that this machine has a 60% duty cycle. It doesn't show any less or any more duty cycle in this, which seems kind of odd. It should have a higher duty cycle on a lower amperage and a lower duty cycle on a higher amperage, but it's just showing 60% duty cycle. So there's that. I don't know how accurate that is. I mean, it should be accurate. It's in the manual, but there you go. But as for everything else, here we'll have a quick look, close-up view of the gun. Nice looking gun. And like I said before in the video, I would like it if they had a standoff more like the Yes Welder one. It's a lot more sturdy. It's not so flimsy like this. I mean, I've had trouble with this getting in the way and a bunch of junk building up on it. And this one just seems more positive when you're dragging on the steel than these do. They kind of move on you, and they bend, you know, like you can bend these to the side. So if you put in any side pressure on your guide plate, you could end up making a wobbly cut, whereas these just don't flex, and they should work a lot better. It would be nice if Bestarc would change to this type of guide. And if you're curious about this 65 amp machine, I have a review on this I did a few months back, and I'll put a link to it right up here for you guys to check that out. Pretty good little machines. So far I've been impressed with Bestarc's machines, how they cut, easy to use, really intuitive machines to use. That I'm super impressed with. For the price of these things and the size of them, pretty hard to beat. So there you have it, machine cuts, and I did cut through 1/2 inch before cleanly. It did it no problem, but it is like on the verge of having a tough time cutting 1/2 inch. The 65 amp machine that I have over there from Yes Welder cuts no problem, and the 65 amp that I have here, the Bestarc here, cuts 1/2 inch no problem, and it's a really nice machine. I like it, and it's gonna stay here. I set them both side by side so you can see the comparison here from the 50 amp 10th generation machine and the 65 amp 7th generation machine. They've made a few changes. The front is obviously different. The display is different. They're both nice and intuitive to use. I got no problems recommending the machines. They cut great, and it's definitely my go-to for just plain hand cutting. And I have my other Yes Welder because it's not a high frequency start set up for my Arc Droid CNC cutter. And from what I remember, Bestarc said they're working on one that is a non-high frequency start to use with CNC, and should be awesome. I can't wait to see that machine come out. But other than that, identical consumables, identical everything else. I like the regulator adjustment right in here, nice and easy, real intuitive, both machines to run. Great little machines. So if you're liking this sort of content, make sure you subscribe, share, like these videos, give me a thumbs up. We'll see you guys on the next video.